Hollywood has been obsessed with the idea of franchise filmmaking since God knows when. Sure, yeah, we got some great movie series that'll go down in the history of cinema, but in reality they were possible because they churned out enough money. Now, that's exactly what bothers me about franchising films. Even though the movies are kickers, yeah, pun intended, the plan for a follow-up was nipped in the bud because it failed to fill the producer's pockets. Now, the Kick-Ass movie franchise was one such series that died an early death, and the third film, well, that never happened. So, let's find out exactly what went wrong.
Let's start from the beginning. A man named Mark Miller wondered why no one ever tried to become a superhero in real life, and with that thought, he decided to create an 8-issue comic series called Kick-Ass. However, Miller sold the film rights of his comic even before the first issue saw the light of day, with the film entering development while the later issues were still being written. Filmmaker Matthew Vaughn got his hands on the copyrights, and both Miller's comic and Vaughn's film were completed simultaneously. Though the basic storyline remained the same and worked towards the same general ending, there were indeed differences between what Miller wrote and what Vaughn put on screen. Miller, however, acknowledged the differences sportingly, and everything was seemingly well. In fact, Vaughn described working collaboratively with Miller a great experience. However, problems started when Vaughn started looking for financiers for the film. Most studios turned him down, citing that the film was too violent, given that it involved children, while others wanted to negotiate and tone down the action. But Vaughn didn't compromise. He went on to fund his film independently with Lionsgate, eventually agreeing to distribute it in the US, while Universal Pictures oversaw the distribution in the United Kingdom. As fate would have it, Kick-Ass went on to become a hit when it was released in 2010, both critically and commercially, and ever since gained a cult following. Naturally, the overwhelming success sowed the seeds of turning Kick-Ass into a franchise and adapting the subsequent comic storylines by Miller. But after Kick-Ass 2 of 2013, the series got lost. Yeah, there are talks of a reboot, but Kick-Ass 3 as a continuation didn't materialize. The problems actually surfaced from the second movie itself. Now, before I get into them, let's check out what Kick-Ass 1 and Kick-Ass 2 were about. The first one introduced us to an ordinary teenager, Dave Lizwiski, who set out to become a real-life superhero and called himself Kick-Ass. Dave was played by the Golden Globe Award-winning actor Aaron Taylor Johnson. He was portrayed as this awkward teenager living in Staten Island, New York, with his widowed father. Influenced by comics, Dave modified a wetsuit one fine day to become a superhero, as the poor boy was brutally attacked and injured by muggers. This, however, didn't deter Dave's determination. Having replaced some bones with metal, he gained an enhanced pain tolerance and also managed to befriend his crush, Katie Domer, played by Lindsay Fonseca. Things started working out pretty well for Dave, who even gained recognition after saving a man from a gang assault. He now opened a MySpace account under the name of Kick-Ass, and of course, Katie reached out for help, who was being harassed by a drug dealer. Sadly, Kick-Ass was outnumbered by the Mafia and his minions, but was saved by two costume vigilantes, Big Daddy and his daughter, Hit Girl. The father-daughter duo had their own agenda to take down the drug lord Frank D'Amico. Big Daddy was actually a former police officer, Damon McCready, who was framed by D'Amico and got jail time. His wife took her own life out of shock, leaving Mindy and Damon to train themselves upon the former's release to get revenge on D'Amico. The Mafia, on the other hand, was now targeting Kick-Ass, and his son Chris came up with a plan. He disguised himself as another vigilante called Red Mist, and lured in Kick-Ass, only to find his dad's warehouse burnt and his men dead. No points for guessing who did it. Big Daddy. The next time, Red Mist organized another meeting and tricked Kick-Ass into revealing the father and daughter's location. D'Amico's henchmen captured them both and beat them black and blue while live streaming it on the internet. Hit Girl, who wore a bulletproof vest, raided in and revealed that she wasn't actually shot dead. Sadly, her father couldn't make it, which ultimately led to Kick-Ass and Hit Girl to team up and kill D'Amico. After their victory, the two decided to give up crime fighting. Dave and Katie pursue a relationship, and Mindy joins the same school as him under the guardianship of Marcus, Damon's previous partner. But Vaughn made Red Mist wear a new suit and swear vengeance against Kick-Ass, because how else would we have gotten a sequel? That wasn't the issue, you know. We were rooting for the next movie. because the first one was solid. On top of that, Kick-Ass maneuvered through a lot of troubles, including getting slammed with an R rating by the MPAA and was being called out for its strong violence and crude language. Yet it managed to make about $96 million against a meager budget of something around $28 to $30 million. Now, it wasn't just about the money. Kick-Ass also got an approval rating of 78% on Rotten Tomatoes, and critics like Chris Hewitt and Peter Bradshaw gave the movie a perfect score of 5 out of 5. Understandably, the sequel was something we all looked forward to. However, little did we know that Kick-Ass's dream of delivering a trilogy would be shattered with this one. Similar to the development of Kick-Ass, Kick-Ass 2 also faced a whole lot of problems. For starters, Matthew Vaughn decided to step back from the director's role. Vaughn already had his hands full with other projects around the same time. Miller soon got the hint that neither Vaughn nor the screenwriter Jane Goldman would return for the sequel. But it seemed like Vaughn wanted to. Right. Well, Miller had spilled the beans in an interview that after Kick-Ass, both of them became superstars with their own projects, and it wasn't likely that they'd come back to work on such a minimal budget again. Moreover, there were scheduling conflicts because honestly, they didn't have time to waste. The thing is, the Kick-Ass 2 characters in the comics were still in high school, and waiting years for the production to be greenlit would make it difficult for the previous protagonists to reprise their roles. The window was really tight, and though Miller hoped that Matthew would at least produce and possibly co-write the script, all he did was get involved as a producer. However, in his heart and mind, he detached himself from Kick-Ass. Ultimately, the sequel was written and directed by Jeff Wadlow and distributed by Universal in 2013. Chloe Grace Moretz and Aaron Taylor Johnson reprised their roles as Hit Girl and Kick-Ass respectively, and Christopher Mintz-Plasse returned as D'Amico's son and the main villain. Still, without Vaughn, Kick-Ass 2 couldn't really fly high. He later revealed that he didn't give in a lot to the film and followed the mantra that a producer should just back the director. Now, Kick-Ass 2 wasn't exactly bad, but if you see it against the backdrop of its predecessor, well, it failed to capture the same magic. There were some major flaws with Kick-Ass 2. I'll go into that, but let me summarize the plot quickly. The movie was set 4 years after the events of the first one. Following the deaths of both Damon and Frank D'Amico, Dave, who retired as Kick-Ass, was getting bored. So, what does he do? Obviously, he started training again with Mindy, aka Hit Girl. Meanwhile, his girlfriend, Katie, mistakenly believed that he was cheating on her with Mindy, so the breakup was inevitable. On the other hand, their nemesis, this time the son of Frank, Chris, was also gaining power. He'd accidentally killed his mother and took control of his father's business. Chris eventually became a criminal lord known as the Motherfucker and formed his own team of villains. The names of the bad guys were meant to be threatening, but somehow they sounded funny too. His group, Toxic Mega Cunts, had members called the Black Death, Genghis Carnage, the Tumor, and Mother Russia. For some reason, all of them wanted revenge on Kick-Ass. Over time, Kick-Ass joined a superhero team called Justice Forever, led by Colonel Stars and Stripes, while Mindy was forced to give up her vigilante acts by her guardian. Things escalated pretty quickly during this time. Dave got involved in a sexual relationship with his teammate, Night Bitch. Mindy angered her school bullies and got suspended, and Dave's father found out that he was Kick-Ass. Dave thus got into a heated argument and left home. Just about then, Colonel Stars and Stripes got killed and Night Bitch got assaulted when Chris's gang was acting in full swing. Mother Russia got a little too ahead of herself and killed some police officers during the confrontation, which led to a major crackdown on masked heroes. The police soon tracked down Dave, being Kick-Ass, but to save him, his father took the fall and was killed in custody. Dave learnt about it from Todd, a former ally who had joined Chris's side. Chris didn't even let Dave mourn his father. At his funeral, the gang ambushed and kidnapped Dave, but Mindy was back in the scene. In a climactic showdown, Mindy, Dave, and new members of Justice Forever fight the Toxic Mega Cunts. Dave fought Chris on a rooftop from where he fell through a skylight into a pool which, for some reason, had a shark. Chris got mauled by the Beast, and Hit Girl finished off Mother Russia. In the end, Justice Forever disbanded, and Mindy left New York because she was wanted for murder. Dave, however, decided to stay back, claiming that the city still needed Kick-Ass. In the post-credits scene, we saw Chris survive the shark attack, but lost his limbs and genitals. We know what that meant. Kick-Ass 3 was on the cards. Unfortunately, Kick-Ass 2 failed to have an impressive box office opening and was even banned in Malaysia for its vulgar title. It didn't exactly run into a loss, but managed to make only $60 million. Moreover, the critics and viewers too didn't go easy on the film. It got an average rating of about 4.9 out of 10, and the same Peter Bradshaw who loved the first one stated that the sequel to 2010's punk superhero rampage has lost quite a bit of its shock value. However, viewers didn't completely abandon the film. Audiences often call Kick-Ass 2 a good brain-rot watch and somewhat satisfactory. Kick-Ass 2 had been praised for having some worthy ideas. Some even loved the vulgarity and humor of the film. In short, Kick-Ass 2 had people divided. While some hailed it as being a great sequel, others, though acknowledging the attempt, couldn't help but see how it failed to retain the novelty of the first one. Coming to the flaws of the film, they were pretty evident. For instance, the fact that the characters had matured kind of handicapped the plot. The character arcs weren't that interesting, and no plotline really got enough substance. It's like you'd enjoy watching Kick-Ass 2, but you'd soon forget about it pretty soon. The antagonist lacked potential, and though Hit Girl stole the show, adding newfound sensitivities to her character and some high school drama felt forced. It's simple. Kick-Ass 2 got unfairly overshadowed by the success of its predecessor. Secondly, it's not really a cinematic masterpiece, meaning don't try finding meaning and depth in Kick-Ass 2. If one took the movie on face value, well, they were in for some unhinged entertainment. So, the thing is, Kick-Ass 2 wasn't disastrous in itself, nor did it have a story that could justify the end of the franchise. There are many such movies in a sequel, some dip than the last one, yet the fall isn't so bad that the franchise is shelved. Not every sequel can be a Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Kick-Ass 2 was also one of those movies. It slipped a little, only for box office returns to turn that into a landslide. Jim Carrey also did his fair share of harm to Kick-Ass 2 when he badmouthed the film and said he regretted starring in it. In fact, during the pre-production of Kick-Ass 2, Miller said that Vaughn was ready to helm the third movie, and he himself confirmed this in 2015. Vaughn wanted Moretz and Johnson to come back as Hit Girl and Kick-Ass, and that work would start in June. However, it never entered into production, and the reasons are multiple. Of course, the underperformance of the second movie was a factor. The real reason for box office loss was piracy. Some claim that Kick-Ass 2 was one of the most pirated movies of the year, and apparently Chloe even mentioned in an interview that if one wanted Kick-Ass 3, they should buy tickets to the second film, rather than pirating it. On top of that, there were rumors that Chloe Grace Moretz was hesitant to return as Hit Girl. Soon, Miller said something that broke all our hopes. He stated that maybe the actors hint towards a third Kick-Ass film in the works when interviewed, but in reality, Miller and Vaughn apparently never talked about it seriously. Vaughn too lost interest in creating a threequel and rather wanted to completely revitalize the franchise. In his own words, "I think with Kick-Ass 2, I learned a lot. That movie really wasn't the film I hoped it'd be. If we did another Kick-Ass, we'd have to be sure that it's got a chance of being as good as if not better than the first one." Yet Vaughn wanted to go for the third part, but here's the catch. He wanted a prequel revolving around how Big Daddy and Hit Girl came to be, for one main reason. He was confident that this one would be good enough to make people forget about the downsides of Kick-Ass 2 and give him a clean slate for the third part. However, that prequel never worked out, and without it, Vaughn didn't go ahead with Kick-Ass 3. To make matters more complicated, rights of the movie were retained by the studios that were previously licensed to produce and distribute it, including Universal Pictures, and they were not greenlighting a Kick-Ass movie anytime soon. Thankfully, the rights reverted to Vaughn in 2023, but it was too late. There's been a gap of a whole decade, and though Vaughn announced plans to produce new Kick-Ass films under his studio banner, the Marv Studios, Kick-Ass 3 is never likely to happen. The reasons are clear. As I said, the waiting period was too long. The idea of having a sequel after 10 goddamn years no longer appeals to the audience. Moreover, there's no question that Chloe and Aaron can reprise their roles as Hit Girl and Kick-Ass anymore. Even if they want to feel like a high school student at heart, there's no way it's possible. Also, there are possibilities that the stars would no longer like to return as the superheroes, even if they had the chance to do so. Both of them have become successful actors now, and Kick-Ass is something they've buried in their past. That means that a Kick-Ass 3 would require a completely new cast, and that's not likely to sit right with the audience who barely have any interest left for Kick-Ass there anyway. So Vaughn decided to do something more practical. Yep, he's bringing back Kick-Ass, but as a complete reboot. Honestly, yeah, I understand. A reset is the only way to justify the inevitable changes, and though he's remained secretive about it, we know that it's gonna be a trilogy. Maybe the stories would only loosely connect to the comics this time, and Vaughn is set to tell us a completely new story. As of now, the fresh Kick-Ass movies are in development. The first one, titled School Fight, has already been filmed and is about to follow a meta approach on modern R-rated superhero tropes. The second one is allegedly titled as Stunt Nuts and will be directed by Damien Walters. But that's pretty much all we know, because Vaughn didn't mention anything about the story in detail or the timeline of their release. And yeah, we know that there would never be a Kick-Ass 3. So, to answer the question with which we began, what actually happened to the Kick-Ass franchise? Well, the answer is a little more complex than just the fact that the second movie was a disaster, which made makers pull the plug on the third. In reality, the second movie fell victim to the glory of the first one and unchecked piracy at the time, and everything else was a domino effect. The meager box office collection, lack of studio enthusiasm to continue the franchise, Jim Carrey backstabbing the film, and lastly, Chloe's decision to walk out of it. But the root of it all? Our expectations. We were way too hyped about Kick-Ass 2, and when it failed even marginally, audiences blew it out of proportion and probably realized it wasn't worth spending money on. Hence, the unauthorized distributions and the entire demise of Kick-Ass 3. Alright guys, that's all for today. I guess there's no point crying over spilled milk. Let's just accept that Kick-Ass 3 would never materialize, and that as viewers we probably have a little more responsibility than just being naive fans. Because somewhere down the line, it was us who were responsible for Kick-Ass 3 to die, and all we can do now is give Vaughn's new trilogy a chance. Do let us know your thoughts in the comments below. I'll see you in the next one. Ta-ta!